5:30 in the morning, somewhere in suburban Chicago, a woman opens her eyes. She has been pregnant or nursing for most of the last 12 years. 6 children are asleep down the hall. The oldest is 11. The youngest just turned 2. And every one of them will need something from her before the sun clears the rooftops. But this is not a story about a woman who chose the life she got. This is a story about the life that was chosen for her. She does not hit snooze. There is no time for that. She slides out of bed quietly so her husband can sleep another 30 minutes because his morning matters more than hers. That is not her personal opinion. That is what the church taught, what the culture expected, and what every women's magazine she has ever read has confirmed. Her job is to make his life smooth so he can go earn the family's income. And her reward for doing that job well is the privilege of doing it again tomorrow. The first thing she does is use the bathroom, and even that is a small production. She puts on a house dress and a touch of lipstick because a 1950s wife does not appear in front of her family looking like she just woke up. That was considered slovenly. Home economics textbooks from the era actually instructed women to be presentable before their husbands saw them in the morning, not for vanity, for duty. Then she heads to the kitchen. Breakfast for 8 people does not make itself. She is cracking eggs, slicing bread for the toaster, boiling oatmeal for the little ones, pouring orange juice, and setting the table before anyone else in the house has opened their eyes. The coffee percolator goes on first because her husband drinks 2 cups before he leaves, and he likes it ready when he sits down, not warm. Ready. By 6:15, the older children start appearing in the kitchen in their Catholic school uniforms. White shirts, plaid skirts for the girls, dark trousers for the boys. She has ironed every one of those uniforms the night before, and if a collar has a crease in the wrong direction, Sister Mary Joseph will notice and send a note home about it. Catholic school in the 50s was not casual. The nuns ran tight ships. They inspected fingernails, checked hemlines, and expected children to arrive groomed and pressed and ready for the Baltimore Catechism before the first bell rang at 8. And if the children showed up looking shabby, that reflected on the mother. Everything reflected on the mother. She checks collars, inspects shoes, reminds the 8-year-old to tuck in his shirt, and braids the 6-year-old's hair because it came undone overnight. The 2-year-old is crying from the crib down the hall, so she retrieves him, changes his cloth diaper, wipes him down, and settles him into the high chair with a few spoonfuls of oatmeal. The 4-year-old wants toast with jam and says so 4 times before she gets to it. Her husband eats at 6:30, reads the paper, and is out the door by 7. He kisses her on the cheek. He tells her to have a good day. He means it, in his way. He is not a villain. He is a man who was taught that this arrangement is natural and holy and good. The Catholic Church told him that the husband is the head of the household, the way Christ is the head of the Church. Pope Pius XI wrote those exact words in his 1930 encyclical, Casti Connubii, calling for the ready subjection of the wife and her willing obedience. That phrase was not a suggestion. It was doctrine. And in 1953, when this woman was 21 years old and walking down the aisle in a white dress, she believed it completely. So her husband goes to work, and now it is just her and the 6 children and the mountain of tasks that will fill every waking minute until she collapses into bed tonight. She stands at the kitchen sink, looks at the stack of breakfast dishes, and for just a moment lets herself be still. That moment is the closest thing to rest she will get until 9:30 tonight. The older 4 leave for school at 7:45. They walk because the family has 1 car and her husband has taken it. She stands on the porch and watches them go, the 11-year-old holding the 6-year-old's hand at the crosswalk, the 8-year-old already running ahead. The Catholic school is 6 blocks away, staffed by nuns in full habits who will teach her children reading, arithmetic, and the Baltimore Catechism. They will learn that the purpose of life is to know, love, and serve God. They will learn that their mother's role in the home is a sacred calling. They will not learn that their mother sometimes cries in the bathroom with the door locked while they are at school. Nobody talks about that. Not at church, not at the doctor's office, not at the neighborhood coffee clatches where the other wives smile and say, "Everything is just wonderful." Now it is 8 in the morning, and the two youngest are home with her. One is 2, the other is 4. The 4-year-old can mostly entertain herself. The 2-year-old cannot. He follows her from room to room while she begins the real work of the day, which is keeping this house from falling apart. She starts with the beds. Every bed gets made, sheets pulled tight, pillows arranged. Then she moves through the house, opening windows and pulling curtains, because fresh air was considered a housekeeping essential in the 50s. Then the breakfast dishes. No dishwasher. Everything washed by hand, dried with a towel, and put away. The kitchen floor gets swept. The counters get wiped. The high chair gets scrubbed because the 2-year-old has smeared oatmeal across every available surface. And then comes Monday's special chore. Because in a 1950s household, each day of the week had an assigned task on top of the daily basics. Monday was laundry day. Laundry for 8 people. Think about that for a second. 6 children, 2 adults, plus bed linens, towels, cloth diapers, and the school uniforms that need to be clean again by tomorrow. Even with a wringer washing machine, this is a 5 to 6 hour job. She sorts by color and fabric. She runs load after load through the machine, feeds each piece through the wringer, hauls the wet clothes out to the backyard, and pins everything to the clothesline. If it rains, the whole operation moves indoors, and damp laundry hangs from every available surface in the house. The cloth diapers are their own ordeal. They have to be rinsed, soaked in a bucket, boiled, washed, and hung to dry. There is no such thing as a disposable diaper in 1953. Pampers will not exist until 1961, and even then, most families will not be able to afford them right away. So, she boils diapers every single day, and with a 2-year-old still in them, she is going through a dozen or more diapers a day, each one requiring that full cycle of rinse, soak, boil, wash, hang. The physical toll of this work is something people gloss over when they romanticize the 1950s. A study looking at household labor found that the average American household in 1900 spent 58 hours a week on housework, mostly cooking, cleaning, and laundry. By the 50s, appliances like washing machines and vacuum cleaners had cut into that number, but a family of 8 still generated a crushing volume of domestic work. Every meal cooked from scratch meant more dishes. Every child meant more clothing. Every day meant more floors to sweep, more surfaces to wipe, more messes to clean before the next mess happened. While the laundry runs, she starts preparing lunch. The 4-year-old wants a peanut butter sandwich. The 2-year-old needs something softer. She eats standing up, if she eats at all, because sitting down for a meal by herself feels like an indulgence she has not earned. Here is the thing that made a Catholic wife's situation different from any other 50s housewife. The Protestant woman down the street had 3 children. She went to her doctor after the 3rd one, and her doctor discreetly prescribed a diaphragm or referred her husband for condoms. That option was closed to a Catholic woman. Completely closed. The church classified every form of artificial contraception as a mortal sin. Using a condom or a diaphragm was not a minor infraction. It was the kind of sin that, if you died without confessing it, could send you to hell. That is what these women were taught from the time they were old enough to understand the words, and most of them believed it. The only method of family planning the church permitted was the rhythm method, which meant tracking your menstrual cycle on a calendar and avoiding intercourse during what you estimated were your fertile days. The problem was that the rhythm method had a typical use failure rate of about 24 to 25% per year. 1 in 4 women using it would become pregnant within 12 months. And for a woman who was already nursing, already exhausted, already running a household with 5 or 6 children, discovering that she was pregnant again was not happy news. It was devastating. Catholic women wrote about this. Starting in the 1940s and accelerating into the early 60s, Catholic laywomen published letters and articles in the Catholic press describing what the contraception ban was doing to their marriages and their health. They wrote about how the rhythm method failed them over and over. They wrote about how avoiding intercourse during fertile periods created distance and resentment between husband and wife. in marriages that were already strained by the demands of caring for large families. And they wrote about the priests who promoted rhythm as if it was simple, as if all you needed was a little self-control, as if the problem were a lack of discipline rather than a lack of options. One anonymous Catholic wife wrote to a Catholic publication saying that rhythm was a manifestation of clergymen looking down from their pedestals, offering platitudes and the letter of the law, with no understanding of what married life actually demanded. These were celibate men telling married women how to manage their fertility. They had never lain awake at 3 a.m. nursing an infant while calculating whether they were in their safe days or their dangerous days. They had never had to look at a calendar and decide whether showing affection to their spouse was worth the risk of another pregnancy their body could not handle. And yet these were the men who stood in the confessional every Saturday and told women what they could and could not do in their own bedrooms. That contradiction hung over everything, and it was enforced most heavily in the confessional itself. A Catholic woman who confessed to using artificial birth control could be denied absolution, which meant she could not receive communion the next morning, which meant everyone in her parish would see her sitting in the pew while her family went to the altar rail. In a tight-knit Catholic neighborhood, that was social exposure. It was shame made visible. But here is what really tells you how deep the conflict ran. In 1952, the Catholic Digest commissioned a poll asking American Catholics their views on a wide variety of topics. When the results came back on 2 particular questions about contraception, they showed that 51% of Catholic respondents said using contraceptives in marriage was not always sinful. The priest who edited the Catholic Digest was so shocked by this number that he refused to publish it. He buried the results. Half the Catholic population already disagreed with the teaching, and the institution's response was to pretend nobody had said anything. So our woman in suburban Chicago goes through her afternoon. The laundry is drying on the line. The 2-year-old is napping. The 4-year-old is playing in the yard. She has maybe 45 minutes to herself, and she spends it ironing her husband's shirts. Not because she wants to, because wrinkled shirts reflect poorly on him at the office, and a wife whose husband looks unkempt has failed at her job. She presses each collar, each cuff, each seam. The iron is heavy and hot. The kitchen is warm. She is 3 months pregnant and her back aches, but she does not complain. Complaining about domestic work was considered ungrateful in this era. You had a home, a husband, healthy children, and a washing machine. What more could you possibly want? That question, what more could you possibly want, is the question that Betty Friedan would eventually make famous. In 1963, Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, and she called it The Problem That Has No Name. She described the widespread depression, anxiety, and emptiness that afflicted post-war housewives who, by every external measure, had everything. Nice homes, loving husbands, beautiful children, and a nameless misery that settled into their bones like a low-grade fever that never broke. Friedan wrote that sometimes a woman would say she felt empty, or incomplete, or as if she did not exist. Sometimes she blotted out the feeling with a tranquilizer. That detail is not incidental. By the mid-1950s, a drug called Miltown had become the first pharmaceutical blockbuster in American history, and its primary market was housewives. Doctors prescribed it for tension, which was the polite word for the anxiety and depression that came from spending your entire adult life inside 4 walls, with no identity outside of mother and wife. A few years later, Valium replaced Miltown and became even more widely prescribed. By 1980, an estimated 20 to 30% of American women were taking Valium. The Rolling Stones wrote a song about it. They called it Mother's Little Helper, and the lyric that stung the most was the observation that women went running for the shelter of a pill just to get through another day that looked exactly like the one before. A Catholic woman had all of that, plus the weight of a religious institution telling her that her suffering was sacred, that her exhaustion was service, that her obedience was holiness. If she went to her priest and said she was overwhelmed, he might tell her to pray more. If she confessed that she and her husband had used contraception out of desperation, The priest might withhold absolution until she promised never to do it again. Confession was not just a spiritual practice. For Catholic women caught between their bodies and their faith, it was a mechanism of control. The only people who could absolve you were the same people enforcing the rules that were breaking you. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The older children come home from school. The house erupts. Book bags on the floor, shoes kicked off, fights over who gets the last cookie, the 9-year-old in tears because a boy pulled her braid at recess. She mediates, referees, bandages a scraped knee, and begins homework supervision while simultaneously starting dinner. The 11-year-old has a religion test tomorrow and needs to memorize the 7 sacraments. The 8-year-old cannot do his long division. The 6-year-old has a note from sister about her handwriting. All of this needs her attention, and all of it competes with a 2-year-old who has just figured out how to open the cabinet under the kitchen sink. Dinner is the performance that matters most. In the 1950s, the evening meal was the centerpiece of family life, and the wife was expected to produce it from scratch every single night. There were no frozen dinners, no takeout, no pizza delivery, and certainly no calling her husband on the way home and asking him to pick something up. She is peeling potatoes, roasting a chicken, boiling green beans, and baking a pie for dessert, because a good wife provides a proper dessert on weeknights. While the food cooks, she does something that would strike a modern person as bizarre. She freshens up. She changes out of her Hauser dress, puts on something nicer, reapplies her lipstick, and fixes her hair. Home economics guides from the era explicitly instructed wives to make the house lovely and themselves presentable before their husbands returned from work. One well-known guide suggested clearing away the clutter, putting a ribbon in your hair, and preparing a tray with cocktail supplies so the husband could make himself a drink when he walked through the door. The reasoning was simple. He had been out in the competitive world all day. He deserved to come home to peace, beauty, and a wife who looked happy to see him. Her husband arrives at 5:30. The children greet him. He loosens his tie, sits in his chair, and she brings him the evening paper and a drink. Dinner is served at 6. She has been on her feet for 12 hours. She sits at the table and serves everyone else first. The children eat. The husband eats. She eats last, if there is enough. After dinner, she clears the table, washes the dishes by hand, wipes down the kitchen, and begins the evening routine of baths, pajamas, stories, and prayers. Bedtime prayers in a Catholic household were not optional. The family knelt together in the living room and recited the Our Father, a Hail Mary, and an act of contrition. The children said their individual prayers. God bless Mommy, God bless Daddy, God bless Sister Mary Joseph, even though she is strict. Then she walks them upstairs, brushes teeth, settles arguments about who left the toothpaste cap off, tucks them in one by one, and checks on the baby last. She changes one final diaper, fills a bottle just in case, and closes the nursery door. She stands in the hallway for a moment and listens. Someone is still whispering. Someone always is. She lets it go. By 8:30, the house is quiet. She has maybe an hour before she should be in bed herself. She spends it ironing school uniforms for tomorrow, darning a sock, or writing a letter to her mother. She does not call. Long-distance calls cost money, and the telephone is in the hallway where her husband might hear her if she said anything honest about how she is feeling. So she writes, and in the letter, she says everything is fine. The children are growing. Mass was lovely last Sunday. She is doing well. She is not doing well. And she does not have the vocabulary to explain why, because the culture has not given her one yet. Depression is not a word that women in her circle use about themselves. Overwhelmed is not a concept anyone takes seriously when applied to a mother. She has a roof over her head, food in the refrigerator, and a husband who does not drink or hit her. By the standards of her parish and her generation, she has nothing to complain about. She is 3 months pregnant with a child she is not sure she can handle, in a house that is already too small, on a budget that is already too tight. She loves her children. That is not the question. The question is whether love is enough to sustain a person who has not slept more than 5 consecutive hours in 4 years, who has not had a conversation with another adult about anything other than children or groceries in weeks, and who cannot remember the last time someone asked her how she was and actually wanted to hear the answer. She gets into bed around 9:30. Her husband is already there, and here is where the day's final pressure lands. The church taught that a wife had a marital duty to be available to her husband. Refusing intimacy without serious reason was considered a sin, and she knows that any intimacy carries a risk because the rhythm method has already failed her twice. She knows that by this time next year she could be nursing a newborn while chasing a 3-year-old while pregnant again. That is not a hypothetical. That is the statistical likelihood given the only birth control method her faith allows. She says a prayer. She turns off the lamp. Tomorrow will begin again at 5:30. This cycle, this exact cycle, repeated itself in Catholic homes across America for decades. Not because these women were weak, and not because they lacked intelligence or ambition. Many of them had been college students before they married. By the end of the 1950s, the average marriage age for American women had dropped to 20. 14 million girls were engaged by the age of 17. And 60% of women who entered college dropped out to get married because the culture told them that education was just a way station on the road to their real career as a wife and mother. They even had a joke for it on campus. The degree women were really pursuing was a PhD, which stood for putting husband through. Things did eventually begin to shift, though not as fast as they should have. In 1960, the FDA approved the first oral contraceptive pill, and it changed the math for millions of women overnight. Catholic women began using it in large numbers, often without telling their priests, often without telling their husbands, and almost never talking about it at the parish coffee hour. In 1963, Pope John XXIII convened a papal birth control commission to study the question. The commission, which included lay Catholic couples for the first time, heard testimony from women about the toll the contraception ban took on their marriages, their health, and their families. The commission voted overwhelmingly to recommend lifting the ban, and for a brief moment it looked like the church would actually change. It did not. In 1968, Pope Paul VI issued Humanae Vitae, which reaffirmed the complete ban on artificial contraception. The commission's recommendation was overruled. One of the conservative theologians on the commission had asked what would happen to the millions they had sent to hell for using contraception if the teachings suddenly changed. And behind that question sat a deeper fear. If women could control their fertility, they would no longer be confined to the home by the demands of constant childbearing. And if they were not confined to the home, the entire structure of the traditional Catholic family, with the husband as head and the wife as obedient heart, would begin to collapse. That is exactly what happened. Catholic women, by the millions, simply stopped obeying. Surveys from the 1970s onward showed that the vast majority of Catholic women used artificial contraception, despite the official teaching. The Church had drawn a line, and most of its own faithful crossed it. Not out of rebellion, but out of survival. Because the woman in the 3-bedroom house in suburban Chicago, the one who got up at 5:30 every morning and ironed her husband's shirts and boiled cloth diapers and ate standing up and cried in the bathroom while her children were at school, that woman finally decided that her body, her health, and her sanity mattered too. She was not wrong. She was never wrong. She was just born into a world that had not figured that out yet. If this story made you think, or if it reminded you of a grandmother or a mother or an aunt who lived a version of this life, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us about her. We cover stories like this every week, so turn on notifications and we will see you in the next one.